game's scapegoat, Jon Perry. Welcome, Jon.
Hi, Kira. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for being here today. So, uh, we're really excited about this game, and it's getting a lot of good buzz online. So, we wanted to spend a little time talking to you today a little bit about how you came up with the game, some of your design process, and then we can even show people the game because we've got a really nice Tabletopia mod for it out there for everyone to give it a try. Does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. So let's start there. Where did the idea for this game come from?
So I wanted to take a social deduction style game and invert it. I wanted to make it so that, instead of doubting everybody else at the table, you're doubting your own identity. But it took me a while to figure out how to do that. And I went through a few themes. Actually, the first theme I had was more of a sort of a Blade Runner-ish thing where you didn't know whether you were a robot or not, which would have been cool, but it ended up not working as well that way. But now the game is more, yeah, you're part of a criminal gang and you're wondering, am I the patsy or not? And you don't know that. But that was the original design goal, and that's where everything stemmed from.
That's really great. So tell us a little bit about the process of testing out a game like this. How do you get the balance of, well, and let's tell people a little bit more about the game.
Sure.
What are you trying to do in Scapegoat? And then we can talk a little bit about how you came up with the mechanisms and how you made sure the balance and everything was there.
So as I mentioned, you're part of a criminal gang, and that's actually made up of goats, right? Hence the name Scapegoat. And you've just done a grand heist. You've just, robbed the biggest bank in Barn City. But as always happens in heist movies, if they go after the heist, there's a little bit of trouble, right? I mean, are the cops going to catch up to you? And in fact, the premise of the game is that they already are catching up to you, and it's only a matter of time. So you've got to throw one member of your team under the bus. You've got to pick a scapegoat that you're going to frame for the crime that you just did. And who's it going to be at the table? So when you sit down to play Scapegoat, you don't know if maybe you are that scapegoat or not. You're going to get some information that tells you who the scapegoat is. It might say that the red player is the scapegoat. And so then your assumption at that point is you're going to be working together with everyone else to try to frame the red player. But there's a chance, and let's say it's a 3-player game, there's a 1 in 3 chance that actually that information you're getting at the beginning of the game is just a flat out lie. The red player is not the scapegoat because you are the scapegoat. So the goal of the game really is, number one, figure out if you're the scapegoat, because if you are, you got to go to the cops before everyone else and flip on everyone. Or if you're not the scapegoat, once you feel confident that it's not you, you need to work together with everybody else to frame the scapegoat, but you've got to coordinate with people in a very subtle way because the scapegoat's sitting at the table right there in front of you. So you can't say things that are obvious, and every little move you make might tip them off.
That's really cool. So I pulled the game up here on the screen so people can get a feel for what you're actually talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and everybody will still be able to hear. I'm going to stop the video for just a second so we can talk about. So these are the different players in the game, the scapegoats, the blue, red, and yellow. And I'll go ahead and make those a little easier for everybody to see here. Let's go ahead and do there we go. Whoops. So this is the thief. You see him hanging from our screen on the side there. We've got our red player who is the face, and then the yellow player who is the pickpocket. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you designed the different abilities for these so that they can be variable, but also still have some fun?
So the emphasis, so I would say that the difference in the goats that you're seeing is a little more of a thematic one.
Mm-hmm.
The real variability doesn't so much come from your character; it comes from those central actions that you see in the middle of the table there, and just the way that the cards come out. Now, something I didn't say about the gameplay is, if the red player is the scapegoat, the way that you frame the scapegoat is you collect red cards, right? That represents evidence against the red player. So you'll see there's some cards out on the table already. There's going to be some cards in people's hands that are secret. Right now, I don't see any red cards out there. I see a blue card. I see a couple. Oh, no, there is a red card actually right there. Um, so I want to go pick up that red card, say, so I can try to frame the red player. Now, obviously, if I go to that, what you do is you'd go to that location, like just above the red card, it says stash. So let's say I was the blue player, say, like, so I would move my blue token, which is over on the far left there, over to the stash, right? And that allows me to pick up that red card and put it in my hand. But of course, if I'm just going and grabbing a red card, that's pretty obvious to the red player, right? They're gonna be like, why are you collecting evidence against me? But they're not gonna know for sure why I did that, because you'll notice that there's also an action right there, right? Which says stash. And that allows me to do a special stash action. So I can always lie and say, well, I just wanted to do the stash action, right? I wasn't interested in your card at all. So that gives you some cover. And just the way the variability again comes from the way that those different actions line up with the different cards at different times, and sort of changes what options you have and what kind of story you're going to tell to your teammates, so that the scapegoat doesn't catch on to what's happening.
It's a very clever little game in how we are going about the manipulation and the secrecy of everything. Someone wanted to ask if everyone can use the central actions. Yes, is the answer, but only one at a time, correct?
So the only rule, you're going to use one of those actions per turn. Everyone can use them. The rule is you can't stay where you are. So you can't use the same action twice in a row.
Very cool. All righty. So talk to us about kind of the going through designing this game and the iteration process that got you to what we see today.
So I had this, again, the general concept of, inverting social deduction so that you're doubting yourself. My first thought was, well, maybe I'll do something you've seen in some other games where you have a identity card facing. Sorry, I shouldn't cover the mic when I do this. An identity card facing away from you so that everyone else can see it but you. And I had a version for a while that worked okay like that, where everyone had a number. It was a pretty wide range of numbers from 1 to 50. And you look around the table and the lowest number is the scapegoat. But since you don't know your own number, the lowest number you see might be a 10, but you don't know if you're a 1 through 9, right? Ultimately, there was limits to that, doing it that way, that I hit some walls, because you can imagine, I mean, if you look around the table and you see a 1, well, then there's not really any doubt about what's going on at that point for you. And I wanted the game, what I like about how the game turned out is when you play it now, from the get-go, there really is total uncertainty about, what, who you are, whether you're the scapegoat or not. And the only real source of information is how people behave. So it's much more about psychology, which is what I wanted, and less about numbers. So that I moved away from that system. And the next system I came up with, which I got some help from, just a kind stranger on, the BGG design forums, which, is a great resource if you have random design questions. Was this sort of ingenious little system. I actually posted a print and play of this on the file section of the Scapegoat page on BGG if anyone is curious and wants to check it out. But it's just 10 cards that sort of, each card says something like the scapegoat is 3 seats to your left or 2 seats to your left. And that allowed this scenario I wanted, where everyone has private information, right? It's a single, but nothing's facing outward. And there's an, equal chance that you're the scapegoat as anybody else is the scapegoat. There's always only one scapegoat at the table, and the scapegoat's information is wrong. Again, this is the problem I was trying to solve, and it was hard to do this. But again, this BGG user gave me this great method. Ultimately, I moved away from that method too, and I still put it online because it may come in handy for some players if they play it to death, and want another way to do it. It was just a little bit fiddly the way you had to deal those cards out. It was it's easy once you get it, but it would have added probably a whole extra page to the rule book just to explain how to deal these 10 cards out in such a way that it created this situation I wanted. So what the game does now is just nice and fast, right? On the back of your player card here, you've got a grid. And these player cards, by the way, are different for different player counts. So the one I'm holding up here, this is a 5-player game. So I would roll 2 dice, and the dice are public. Everyone sees the results, and those are basically coordinates for this grid. So after I roll the 2 dice, let's say it was a a black 3 and a white 7. Okay, so I'd say here's this is a little bit tricky for me to do here, but let's see if I can get it up with the narrow. Well, you'll get the idea, right? I'm not, because like the screen is a little smaller here, but you find the intersection of those two coordinates, and that tells you who the scapegoat is. And because we're using this sort of pre-made chart, everything can be set up to be perfect so that there's always just one scapegoat and everybody agrees on that information except the one person. Now, you might ask, like, what if you've had the same role before? Well, there's 120 of these on here, and you can just re-roll. And that's what I like about this method versus the one I was experimenting before. Is this is just super fast. And this is a game you usually want to play a couple times in a row. So like after you play once, you want to start the next game, you just re-roll the dice. Everyone checks the back of their card again, and you're good to go.
That's super fun. Well, so we were showing this in Tabletopia just now. So there is a free demo up on Tabletopia. You guys can check out. There are some events being run by the demoers during BGG at home, or you can just go free play if you like. You can click here on the screen. You can click in the comments. Trisha is posting those for us right now. Thank you, Trisha. And of course, if you would like to purchase the game, you can do so right here. It's on Amazon. Really easy. You get your Amazon Prime shopping and all that fun stuff going on there. So let's move forward a little bit from this game. So like, what is next for you? What are you working on now?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I mean, probably the biggest thing I'm working on is actually a video game, and this is public, so this is something I can totally feel comfortable talking about. I'm actually 5 years into development on this game. It's called and I think next year, 2021, will be the year it finally comes out. But it's a pretty ambitious project. It's called UFO 50. If you want to get more information about it, you can go to 50games.fun, and it's what it sounds like. It's 50 games all in one. So, I mean, the real quick pitch would be, if you imagine a video game company from the 80s, from some alternate timeline, some game company that never existed, or maybe it was this timeline, but they went out of business, and you uncovered this like cache of 50 games in your attic, or the attic of some relative. That's kind of what this is. That's the framing story. This is a company that never really existed, but we've created a whole backstory for them. And these are the 50 games that they made, and they're all made to the specifications of that time period in the 1980s. But we're not limiting ourselves to 1980s design. We're using modern design and actually bringing in a lot of modern modern board game ideas into this video game. But yet it looks like it's from this time, and of course it's 50 games to explore, and there's a backstory to them. So that's why it's taken 5 years. You can probably tell that that's
Wow,
a big project.
that sounds incredible. Wow, that's really cool. So, are there any more board games in your future?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am. Let's see. I don't know how much I can say. I'm working on I'm working on an expansion. I think I can talk about this. I'm working on an expansion for a game that's being published right now, called Air, Land, and Sea.
Oh yeah, that's a great game from Arcane Wonders.
That's right. Yeah. So, I'm developing more content for that. Most likely an expansion that's pretty far along. I don't know. I don't have anything like, a release date or anything. And I'm sure they wouldn't want me to say too much more, but that's definitely something I'm working on. I'm working on a dice game. I don't know if people know the video game that came out recently called Dicey Dungeons.
Sounds super familiar.
It's sort of a dungeon crawly game where you are with dice placement. And I'm working with a couple collaborators on a board game that takes a little bit of inspiration from that, which is fun because it feels like it's part of this conversation between video games and tabletop, which I really like, because Dicey Dungeons is a video game, but it's a video game that uses dice placement. So it's hard to imagine that video game existing if, things like Alien Frontiers or Kingsburg hadn't existed before that. And then we're kind of saying, well, let's now take this video game and bring it back into tabletop. So
Yeah.
it's this,
Let's give it a Euro element.
it's like a conversation back and forth between the two mediums, which I don't know, I really enjoy that.
That sounds awesome. So speaking about things that you enjoy, why don't you tell us, I'm going to start with, what are some of your favorite board games?
Uh, One of my favorites has got to be Dominion. I was just playing the web app with some two good friends last night. Um, the online implementation of that's going right now is really good, and the fact that you can just mash up all, I don't know how many sets there are now, 14 something. It's crazy, and get so much variety and have it do all the shuffling for you. And in these pandemic times, play it with anybody in the world. That I've been getting a lot of joy out of that recently, and um, I mean, that's been a game I've been playing consistently. I know a lot of people sort of maybe played the base set and then left that game, within the original fad when that game came out, and then left the game behind. I've continued to play that game, and the new sets just make it better and better and more interesting. I really haven't gotten tired of it. So that's one of the first ones I'd throw out there.
That's awesome. Are there any games that inspired you when you were thinking about Scape Goat and the way you were building Scape Goat out?
Yes, there's well, let's see here. Yes and no. So obviously all the other social deduction games that are out there are, obviously an influence. Um, I think initially when I was trying to do the card facing away from you, I was thinking of things like Hanabi, or even just,
Mm,
Indian poker. That's probably not a
yeah.
PC term, but these days, but you know what I mean. Um, I didn't. I mean, other than that, oh, actually, you know what? I thought of a good one. The final solution that I came up with, this chart, that was definitely influenced by Chameleon. If people have
Oh,
played,
great.
because that uses a similar system to solve this problem of how to give out secret information quickly. So I'd say maybe Chameleon plus all the other social deduction games out there.
Speaking of social deduction games as a whole genre here, I have a feeling that might be why you came to Indie Boards and Cards with your game. Is that right?
Yes, that was
Maybe.
that was no, no, that was definitely part of it. I forget, how the first contact with Indie Boards and Cards happened. It might have been at one of those speed dating things,
Oh yeah,
but I already, even if it was a bit of a chance encounter, I already had your company in mind. Yes, because obviously social deduction is something that you're known for.
absolutely. So we'll wrap up here with, I think we definitely always have people watching at these conventions who are also game designers or budding game designers, or maybe thinking about becoming a game designer. Do you have any tips or just things to consider that you want to say out to them today?
Yes, I feel like if you're, well, it depends what part of the process you're stuck in, right? Is it the design part or the getting published part? So I'll just, since I was just talking about the getting published part, let's just stick with that for now.
Sounds
Um,
good.
Many people may have heard this before, but really, and obviously you can't do it now, unfortunately, but going to conventions in person, I think really made a huge difference. I think I've signed 3 games now, and they were all because of conventions. In fact, mostly because of BGG which we're virtually at right now. So that's definitely my first big piece of advice. As once this pandemic is over, hopefully, crossing our fingers soon. Uh, I know it can be expensive to go to conventions, but I think that's the best thing if you can do it. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like proto spiels and things like that out there that are specifically for uh, design, like early design process and getting feedback from other designers and play testing and all that fun stuff. Do you ever participate in any of those?
Yes, Protospiels are great. Unpubs are great. I've I recently moved to the East Coast, but when I was in California until recently, I there were many of those within reach of me that I went to as often as I could. So I would definitely recommend those. I mean, at Protospiel specifically, I mean, you can take a game. I mean, you can make a game twice as good over the course of a weekend going to a Protospiel, because you
Oh,
just get
absolutely.
so many eyes on it and so much good feedback. So I highly recommend those if you can go.
That's awesome. So you mentioned, not being able to go to a physical convention right now, we are obviously right in the middle of a digital one. How has it been kind of moving to digital board games using Tabletopia, like we saw with Scapegoat or TTS or Board Game Arena? Has that been helping you at least talk about games or maybe even just iterate your games?
Well, I think it's been an adjustment period for everyone. I mean, a lot of us have had to learn new pieces of software and so on. It's also changed what I'm working on. I think, you asked me some of the things I was working on before the pandemic hit. I was working on some very big party style games that were going to be, 8 players. And I moved away from that pretty quickly. So it seems like a good time to work on smaller player count games, even 1 player. Um, I don't know if that exactly
Oh
answers your
yeah,
question,
it
but
does. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That so you're looking at designing or working on things that have a solo or good for lower player counts. Do you? And you mentioned party games, but do you think uh, you can have a party-like game at a lower player count?
well, yes, yeah, absolutely. I think, you probably need at least 3 for it to feel at all partyish, and maybe 4 is the sweet spot. But I mean, Scapegoat, I think maybe fits the bill. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not social deduction games are and aren't party games, right? I mean, they tend to be social. They tend to be a little simpler in the rules. Um, they're maybe less about laughter, which so that's a little bit different. But if you're the kind of person who would play a social deduction game at a party, I think Scapegoat's kind of nice because it is a 3 to 6 player
Yeah.
range, which is pretty low for that style of game.
Absolutely. So we have a question coming in, so I'm going to throw it up on the screen here for everybody else. Do you feel confident in the playtesting for Scapegoat? And would you say playing the game in person adds to the game, mannerisms and such, or is how do you feel about that versus the online?
Uh, so do I feel confident in the playtesting? Yes, as much as I can. I mean, this
Hmm.
game got worked on for years, and so I feel that it's good. Once it hits the larger audience, you never know what they discover. Um, and I think playing in person does add to the game, but I think it would work online quite well. When you play in person, you're gonna have a few more, like, subtle social cues, that are gonna show up, facial expressions when someone's lying, gestures, and, of course, this game allows totally open communication, so in person, you could do a thing like flash someone a card when someone's not looking, there play footsie with someone to, like, say, "Hey, you should do this." So there is some element that's lost, but the game also I think it's flexible because again, it allows any communication. So, just in some ways digitally, the communication medium has just changed, right? And especially if you're in something expressive like Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator where you can literally move the pieces around. I
Hmm.
think there's probably a lot of subtle communication you can still do. Um,
Yeah. Well,
so
and you have Discord for like video or Zoom or Google Hangouts, whatever people are using, and like work out some hidden cues, or maybe because you know each other, you kind of get each other's mannerisms on video. Well, so we've been just for those of you just tuning in. Of course, we have the game available for you on Tabletopia so that you can try it out before you buy it. And if you would like to just go ahead and pick it up, because it is a great game at 3 players, which lower player count right now I know everybody is looking for. So you can click on the link in the chat for go directly to the game or go try it out on Tabletopia with your friends today. So thank you, Jon, so much for being here. It was really nice to get to talk to you and everybody hear a little bit about your work behind the scenes on this game and what's coming next from you. We're all looking forward to that. So thank you so much.
absolutely, this was fun.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching and we appreciate it and enjoy BGG at home.